going to switch the order and come to the Canterbury Arena because there are certain papers that I think need to get through. We'll do the community funding allocation paper immediately following that. So, so the Canterbury Arena is on the right. There's attachment supplementary agenda number 2, and this is a recommendation to receive the multi-use arena pre-feasibility report prepared by the Stadium Trust, and it notes provisions and it requests that officials work with the Crown to identify funding options for meeting the potential funding gap. So I'd like to move this, and you want to second it? Yep, seconded by David East. So is there any discussion?
Technically, because David and I become involved.
No, we're receiving a report. We're requesting that work be done on a funding gap. So no, there's absolutely no conflict at all. Yanni?
Just had a number of questions.
No, sorry. I opened it up for debate.
When do we ask questions? Is it up now?
Yeah. Sorry. This is questions around receiving the report and asking.
Yeah, so we're being asked to ask officials work with the Crown on a number of issues.
Around funding options for meeting the potential funding gap.
Well, that's in the report, but we can obviously choose whatever we want as council.
What?
So the question I wanted to, and I put these questions ahead of the meeting. So some of the assumptions in here, particularly between some of the options, are very, there's a huge difference, particularly around option 2 and 3 in regards to EBITDA. So I presume if we're going to way to work with the Crown, it's on the preferred option.
No, at this stage, what we've noted in this report is that the pre-feasibility study provides some guideline around the general direction. It's very clear that the facility that's built needs to be a multi-use arena, so that will lead us to a hard floor plus removable turf. It's clear that it needs a roof of some sort, and that it's clear about the approximate seating capacity that the key stakeholders wanted. So what it's setting is a direction that we need to head in. The next stage of the work, which will be actually looking at some more details around those turf and roof options and moving into the business case, we'll actually develop the options more clearly. Yeah. So all we're asking Council to do today is to receive the report, not make any decision about which the preferred options or not. Those will be further expanded and tested out in the next phase.
So,
yeah. And I think it's really important to understand what we're being asked to do here, which is to receive the report and request that officials work with the Crown to identify funding options. The next step under the cost sharing agreement is we enter into a business case process. The business case process will flesh out a lot of the detail, but we're asking staff, our staff, well, not through here, but they are going to do this, is to analyse what these different options mean in terms of whether they are appropriate for our environment. You know, these are this is the way that like retractable pitch is the one that obviously needs quite a considerable amount of work. It's the way of the future. It's the way overseas multi-use arenas are operating, and it's multi-use. That's the key to it. So so staff are going to do that work, but it's as part of preparing for the business case, and the business case is something that in the cost sharing agreement remains the responsibility of central government.
So my understanding is central government will choose the model, whether that's a private sector model or a public sector model, and until that decision's made, we don't know what the funding gap is.
That's right.
So what I'm interested in is under 5.
But there's a funding gap for all of them.
That there is. So is 5 going to be looking at all the funding gaps of all the options, or is it only looking at the preferred option?
Well, it's obvious from the work that's been done is that if if it was only the amount that council has on the LTP, we would only get a 17,500 seat facility with no roof. And that is not what the key stakeholders have told us they want, or we believe the people of Christchurch. So there will obviously be a funding gap of some sort to get the facility we need, a multi-use. So this preliminary work is trying to, it's not saying we have a preferred option and we're meeting the gap between that and what we have. It's saying let's start some work to see what the funding options are, at the same time as developing further that business case and testing out some of the options.
If the preferred option is agreed to and it's a public sector development, there is no funding gap. The Crown was very clear in the cost share. Well, the cost share agreement
unfortunately,
was very
the cost
clear
sharing agreement, you could drive a bus through. In terms of the wording of the cost sharing agreement, it is not crystal clear. And in fact, you can read it as saying that we're on our own building a 35,000 seat open air stadium in a new location. And that is, according to this report, a complete waste of money.
That's right.
So, you know, and it's, look, I didn't sign the cost sharing agreement. It's not language that I find incredibly helpful to try and retrofit the modern environment to. But the reality is, and, you know, I do get up every morning and ask for the courage to accept what I cannot change, the the strength to accept what I cannot change, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I know that the cost sharing agreement is not wording that actually leads to a specific statement that the Crown has contributed half. But I am very hopeful that various political parties using the environment of the general election will consider whether they would like to make clear their intentions in that regard.
So the two final questions. One is that we understand from the media there's an announcement today. So why are we considering this ahead of that announcement?
Because I haven't been officially informed of an announcement. I have heard that there may be an announcement today. I have no idea what that announcement is. This was on the agenda long before then.
I think that various discussions around what political parties are promising during an election campaign is quite different from a government actually committing to a particular element in terms of their budget proposal. So all political parties are you know, eyes on this issue, and I'm sure that all political parties will be considering it at the moment. So I don't think that anyone in the election period considered this as a government matter. We've got the cost sharing agreement on the agenda as well, and that is really the end of it as far as this electoral cycle is concerned.
Okay. And the final question was around the additional 60 million. So I note that the figures in this report exclude the land costs, but I would have thought we should, for transparency with our community, have the land costs as part of the project. And it was reported, I think, in the newspaper that the government has spent 60 million on acquiring the land. So given that that's a significant amount of money, is in terms of the business case that we're looking at in terms of being developed, are we able to include the option of actually just building the preferred option at Lancaster Park, saving the 60 million? Is that something that can be considered?
But that's not something that is for debate at the moment. You would have to rescind a resolution that you've already made, and you would need to go through a process to rescind that resolution. But at this point, this paper is only asking you to receive the pre-feasibility study. It's not traversing what options are to be considered in the business case. There will be more discussion about that at a later date. At this stage, we're just asking you to receive the report, note some of the findings in the report, and request that we work with the Crown around funding. So we're not at the point of actually asking you which options we take forward into the business case. But that will be later.
Yeah. That work in terms of funding could include the savings by building on publicly owned land.
No, it can't. Glenn?
Am I still able to ask a question? Okay. Or it's
I know.
the risk of being a bit churlish, what if we decided not to receive this information? So what is the real effect of not receiving it?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Right.
I mean, the report's been written.
Yeah.
We agreed to have
Yep.
this report done.
I know that.
And it would be churlish
Yeah,
not
I know.
to receive it.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you prefaced your remarks by saying that might sound churlish, because it
Good.
did.
So I wanted to do that.
All right. So I will now open it up for debate. I'll put the motion. Yanni?
I don't support receiving this today. We've heard, it was a late supplementary report, and it was in PX, and then it was released publicly, and between that, it was already on the press website. So, you know, I think we've heard that there's going to be an announcement today. We don't know what that announcement's going to be. I can't see why we shouldn't wait to receive this at our next council meeting once we know what that announcement has been. It's really clear, I think, from the cost share agreement that council signed, the report that went to council, that if the public sector model was chosen by the government, that they were responsible for the 253 million, or half of the cost of building the stadium. So I'm not even sure why we're being told that there's a funding gap unless the Crown don't have the money on budget. And I think, you know, people do want some certainty, but if you go back to the history of the blueprint, when the blueprint was announced, it was said that the council would have to fund the stadium with the private sector and that the Crown wouldn't be contributing. Obviously, as part of the cost share, that changed. There was a huge amount of work going to the cost share. But I think what this does is it really highlights the unaffordability of the blueprint, because building public facilities on private land has meant that the costs are going through the roof. And the tragedy was that there was no agreement to funding before the blueprint was announced. And if those funding decisions had been made before the blueprint was announced and sorted, then I think we would have seen a lot more progress in the city. So in some ways, this is a legacy of not having clarity from the start, and of decisions being made that have then been repeatedly changed through a number of different agreements, and in some cases, no agreement. So, you know, I think the future of the stadium is an important issue, and I think it is good that work has started, but there really does need to be some clarity with central government over what model they're choosing and what money they have or haven't got on budget. And until we know that, I don't think we can be making decisions, and I don't think we know what the funding gap will be. I'd also say that one of the interesting things in this report is the huge difference between option 2 and option 3 in terms of what's expected in terms of EBITDA, and I think we really do need to get some understanding around what the life cycle costs are of a stadium, and particularly around the different options, because it does seem quite a massive difference between those two, and it is hard to understand that. But I appreciate, as part of the business case, that work will be done, and we will have much more information at that stage. Finally, I would say that we should not rule out building at Lancaster Park. If we can save $60 million to the ratepayers and the taxpayers, then why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we do that? Why would we rule out an option of saving money, given we now know that the cost of what's proposed in the blueprint is unaffordable, and that there's public land that we own that could actually save a significant amount, I think, as I said, $60 million. So I won't receive this today. It's late, it's supplementary, and we've got an announcement this afternoon that we don't know anything about by government, and until we know what that is and have had more time to consider it, I don't think we should be receiving this report.
Andrew?
I think it's good that this report has gone into the public arena. I think it's great that this report exists. Certainly in various forums and conversational groups that I've been part of in the last day or so, this has been a hot topic of conversation, and it's right that it should be, because this multi-use arena will be a key facility for Christchurch. Noting we've now got the report, that means that we can further this conversation. It's a conversation people have been waiting to have in a sensible way for some time. Noting that there is now a preferred option, we've now actually got something to pin that conversation to. We've actually got something which has had some work gone into it that tells us what a multi-use arena for Christchurch might look like, but also, just as importantly, what it might cost. And it's interesting that the 253 million that we've got on budget would deliver and it's point 4 in the recommendations, a modest provincial venue of 17,500 seats with 60% roof coverage of seating bowl. For a city of the stature of Christchurch, for a city of the importance of Christchurch, for the main centre in the South Island, which will need to have a regional facility, if not a national facility, as a stadium or arena, that's not going to do. That really doesn't cut the mustard for Christchurch, and we shouldn't be prepared to accept it. There is a funding gap, and there's certainly a perception of a funding gap. I believe it's been the expectation of our communities that we would put in 253 million and that government would pay the other half. And I think there's no coincidence that 253 million is approximately half of what the feasibility study tells us. So I say, bring the conversation on. I'm fully supportive of our staff having that conversation with government. I think the timing's perfect. We need this to land in time to have a sensible conversation about it as part of the development of our long-term plan, because if we don't land this in the long-term plan, there will be further delays. That's the reason why we need to receive this report today. We need to progress the conversation as quickly as possible, and I welcome it.
Tim, and then Vicky.
Thank you. Look, I'm not going to go too much into it because I'm totally supportive of what Andrew said. That what I will say, though, is where we are looking at putting it. It's about utilising the central city. It's about maximising what we have. And if you look at putting an arena back into Lancaster Park, it will be isolated, and the cost of traffic management, it's wasted money. We're investing hugely, and we have private sector investment into the central city. This is where it has to be, and it has been identified by the pre-feasibility study that all those visions and beliefs way back at the blueprint about private investment into this, it's not a reality. And today what we've got to do is get everything right, and whatever that is, then we've got to deal with it. And I totally agree with Andrew. The expectation was that the government would pick up the other half, and I think that our estimate of 253 was absolutely right, and it's shown that with the preferred statement, the preferred outcome. When you're looking at options 1 to 4, they are very, very different beasts. The option 2 to option 3 is chalk and cheese when you are coming down to the ability to use those the arena versus stadium. They are totally different things, and that's the good thing about this, and we've got to get it out to discuss this. Thank you.
Vicky? I think that the major issue that people have with the stadium is the cost, but people definitely want to have that debate, and I think the very best time to have it is 30 days out from an election. And so I'm totally up for those mature discussions and the bidding wars that will go on in the next 30 days. I think it's excellent. I love the Auckland model of local government funding, where everything they do is matched by the government. I think that's an excellent model of local government funding, and I don't know why it can't extend to the South Island. So I'm looking forward to it happening in the next 30 days. Glenn, then Sarah.
Thank you. Yes, today I think we can actually say as an invitation to the various political parties to show the money. One thing I would say, though, is in our experience of joined up projects is when we get to the point, you know, what degree of control will we have over it, particularly around procurement and delivery. We've seen delay after delay over these big projects, so it could come down to being a near 50-50 cost split, but a big question for me at the time will be who will control it. I welcome the debate.
Sarah?
Thank you. I'm just really keen to see the business case, and I'm keen to see a business case which looks not only at the operating performance of each of the different options and whether they stack up year on year, but a business case that looks at actually servicing the debt that the ratepayers are taking on for the $253 million. Because that $253 million comes with an opportunity cost, not just the actual interest and things that we end up paying on it as ratepayers. And there's an enormous opportunity throughout the city for a range of different things that we could spend $253 million, or in fact not spend $253 million and not increase rates as much. It's very clear from the report that rates will increase, and that's currently budgeted for. But I'd really like to make sure that the business case has the debt servicing taken into account and not just the operational performance.
Mike?
Thank you. This is actually a really great step forward and where we need to go. It is really important for the city to once again have a proper stadium or multi-use arena, and it's a shame that it's sort of been left to the end while we see that the library get built, the town hall get repaired, everything else around art and culture has been met and been rebuilt, yet sport is actually one of the pillars that hold up this city. We are a great sporting city, and it's really important that this moves forward as much as we possibly can. It is really great to see that we're going to be capping at 253 and nothing else, and it's time for the government to step up. If all they want to do is contribute to land, then we might as well go back to Lancaster Park and use that area, because quite frankly the value of the land is not worth anything compared to what we're going to be building on there. I also have slight concerns about a retractable pitch being put onto a very, very expensive prime real estate where people won't even be able to walk on it.
Sorry, I went to turn that off. So I'll put the motion. What? Sorry? No, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Yeah, go ahead. So no. Thank you.